Hello, my name is Carrie, and welcome back to Wearables and Shareables. Today we're going to be doing part 3 in our Mezzo Cardigan series by Make and Do Crew. Of course, if you haven't seen parts 1 or 2 yet, go check them out in the link below or in the info card up above. Now, last time we were here, we talked about gauge, and we measured our gauge swatch to make sure that our project was going to come out to be the appropriate size. So if you haven't done that yet, be sure that you check the gauge and that you make sure that both of your hexagons are exactly the same. That took us to the end of row 7, and now we're going to be starting our first puff stitch row. To get started with that, we first need to identify which number each side is going to be referenced as throughout the pattern. So if you purchase the pattern from Etsy, towards the back there are going to be some handy little number plates that you can cut out and attach to your pattern. And if you look at them here, it'll say 1 left, 1 right, 2 left, 2 right. The left and right are not referring to the right side and wrong side of your work. Rather, they're referring to the left or right side of your cardigan as it is worn. And instead of using these little paper number markers that were provided in the pattern, I happen to have some little number plates that I just attached using some bulb shape stitch markers. I just purchased these little enamel numbers off of Amazon, and I have plenty of little bulb shaped stitch markers around. So I've just numbered them according to my pattern. But if you end row 7 and go to start the first puff stitch row, this first side is going to be side number 1. Then if you give it a clockwise turn, the next side will be side 2, clockwise turn again, side 3, clockwise turn for side 4, clockwise turn for side 5, and clockwise turn for side 6. Now, I know it's a little difficult to see my particular number markers. You could also do this just with different rainbow colors of these little bulb shaped markers or any kind of open and closing ones. I've done this cardigan before where I just used rainbow order colors. So my first side was red, the next side was orange, then yellow, then green, then blue, then purple for my indigo at the end of the rainbow. And the nice thing about this pattern is that each side maintains its number, whether you're working on the right side of the work, which remember is the side that faces out, or whether you're working on the wrong side of the work. And remember, that's the side that's going to be touching your skin. So once you have identified which number each side of your hexagon belongs to, we can continue on to our puff stitch rows. Now the puff stitch is what gives this pattern its particularly beautiful texture. And you'll notice in the pattern that it wants you to work on the wrong side. So I have a stitch marker here denoting that this is the right side of my pattern, and I also have my little number plaques attached to the right side. So I need to turn mine around, and if I'm not sure, again, I can find the tail from where I started my magic circle earlier in the project. And it wants me to work the first half of round 1 just by doing double crochet stitches to this corner. And this corner happens to be the corner between side 1, if I were to look at my little number plate here, side 1, and side 6. Because when I'm facing the right side, here's side 1, over here is side 2, and side 6 is over here. So when I flip them, they'll maintain their numbers, side 1, side 6, and side 2 over here. So all I need to do is work my double crochet stitches until I get to this corner, which is where I'm going to work my first puff stitch. And of course, I'll show you exactly how to do that. So let me just get myself worked over to that corner. And again, you should have 27 double crochet stitches before you start this part of the pattern. That 27 on each side, that is. So be sure that you have your 27 double crochet stitches on each side of your hexagon before moving on to your puff rounds. Now, if you're like me and are a larger size, you may have had to do an extension. This is listed in the pattern as well. So you may have done up to round 9 before moving on to your puff stitch rounds. It wouldn't be like me to not have a yarn tangle, so let me just fix that up. And the reason I have all these yarn tangles is just that occasionally it takes me more than one try to film a video, so I might have to take my work back out. Some behind the scenes realness there. All right, I'm coming up to my corner, and this is where I really need to pay attention. In some corners, I'm going to be working 2 puff stitches. In other corners, I'll be working 2 double crochets and 1 puff stitch. And of course, I'm going to have that chain 2 in between like I normally have. So if you have the paid version of the pattern from Etsy, she has a really handy chart in here to help you reference when it is that you're going to be doing just 1 puff stitch in a corner and when you might need to do 2 puff stitches in a corner. And if you need more information about chart reading, there are a lot of really great tutorials out there. I particularly like Sun Dragon Sideshow. I can't say it. Sun Dragon Sideshow makes a really great tutorial on reading crochet charts. But basically, the idea is that you can see the stitches where they are supposed to be, and you can compare them to your work. This particular chart, though, is abbreviated. There are not 27 double crochet stitches here, just to make sure that everything could fit on the page. And really what we need to know is whether we need 1 puff stitch or 2 in our corner. And you'll see what I mean as we continue to work here. So I'm coming up to my first corner, and in this first corner, I need to work 2 double crochets to start the corner. Those 2 double crochets are going to belong to side 1 of my hexagon here. I'll work my chain 2, and then I need to work a puff stitch into that chain instead of working 2 more double crochets. So a puff stitch, in this case, it's going to be a 9-strand puff stitch, which means we're going to have 9 strands of yarn on our hook before we yarn over and pull through everything. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is yarn over, insert our hook, grab a strand of yarn, and then I'm going to sort of pull it up a little bit because I want to make it longer. If I make my strand too close to my work or it's too tight, I'm going to have trouble getting my hook through all 9 strands at the end. So there's our first yarn over and pull through. Yarn over, pull up a loop, number 2, yarn over, pull up a loop, number 3, yarn over, pull up a loop, number 4. And if I count, I should have 9 individual strands of yarn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now to finish off my puff stitch, I'll yarn over once more and draw through all of the loops on my hook. And there is my little puff stitch. We're going to be using these all throughout the rest of this pattern to give it a beautiful texture. Now, if you read the directions, it's going to tell you to chain 1. That sort of closes off the top of our puff stitch. And then it says to work 1 puff stitch into the first double crochet after the corner. So that is going to be this double crochet right here. So I'm going to show you another way that you can count when you are doing your puff stitches. We'll yarn over, and you can count 1, 2. There are already 2 strands of yarn on your hook. So when you insert and pull up a loop, now you have 3, yarn over, insert, pull up, that's going to be 4 and 5, yarn over, insert and pull up, that will be 6 and 7, yarn over, insert and pull up, that will be 8 and 9. So if I count my individual strands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I'll yarn over and pull through all of the loops on my hook. Then I'll do a chain 1. Because these puff stitches are sort of fat, they take up more space than a double crochet does. So in order to make each of the sides of our hexagon maintain their same length or width or whatever you want to call it, we need to skip the next double crochet because basically this puff stitch takes up the space of 2 double crochets here. It's too fat to fit another one right next to it. So I'll skip this next stitch and I'm going to work a puff stitch into the one after that. So I need to yarn over, insert, and pull up 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. That will give me 9 strands of yarn on my hook. before I yarn over and pull through all 9. Now that I have all 9 strands on my hook, I'll chain 1 again to close off the top of that puff stitch, skip this double crochet that comes next in the line, and work another puff right here. So another way to count it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Whether you prefer to count by 1 or count the 2 at a time as you're doing your yarn overs, it doesn't really matter as long as you end up with 9 on your hook. And you can see here, if you make your, if you don't pull up high enough on your yarn when you're bringing it through, you might get your hook stuck. It doesn't want to move through there. So as you're working, be sure that when you are, I'm just going to undo that stitch. Be sure that when you're yarning over and inserting, you give it a nice tug on the way up so that you have enough space to get your hook through. If you were to think about the shape of these, they're a little bit teardrop shape. They're fatter at the top and skinnier at the bottom down here. So I like to keep my hook sort of close to the top of those stitches if I can while I'm pulling through so they don't get stuck. And I'm just going to continue working my puff stitches until I get to my next corner. Then I may need to reference my chart or the written pattern directions to know whether I'm working 2 puff stitches next to each other or whether I'm working 2 double crochets and a puff stitch. So just one more time, we'll skip this double crochet and we'll work into the next one. I like to count 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're just yarning over and inserting as if you were going to do a double crochet, but instead of finishing the stitch, you're just building up until you have 9 loops on your hook before yarning over and pulling through. Oh, you might lose that little stitch somewhere in the center there. That's okay, just try again if it happens. Happens to me all the time. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yarn over, pull through everything, chain 1, skip 1, puff stitch. Okay, I hope that helps give you some idea of what the texture in this project is going to look like. Be sure that you have purchased enough yarn because this is sort of a yarn eater. With having 9 strands of yarn on your hook, to do each puff stitch, it's going to go through yarn pretty quickly, which is another reason why that gauge is so important. If your gauge is off, you may use even more yarn than you had initially planned. So I hope this helps, and I will see you towards the end of this project to talk about how to do the ribbing along the bottom, how to make the pockets, and how to seam everything together. See you soon. Bye.